to start by introducing himself. A lot of people do know him. In fact, a lot of people know him. And but perhaps you can introduce yourself, Erran, and.
Yes, I'm Erran Cohen. I'm a musician, producer, and best known as a film composer for, and best known, the biggest films I've done while working with my brother. I've been working with him since he was born. But, you know, I did everything from the Ali G stuff, and then Borat, the first one, Bruno, The Dictator, Grimsby, and now the new Borat. He does a film once every 5 years, so I do a lot of stuff in between that, and I've done lots of other feature films. I write music for TV channels, and I've written symphonies for... Actually, after the first Borat, I wrote a symphony for the Kazakhstani Philharmonic Orchestra, which was an interesting project. And it's very varied what I do. I play trumpet, piano, bongos, and occasionally sing. And the maracas I'm very fond of. Is that enough for the starters?
That's a good start.
I can tell you more, but yeah.
Erran, when you're given a brief, where does your inspiration come from?
Yes, so I think every project, really, you start from scratch and you never quite know. Really, you start at the point where you have no idea how to get through it, you know, because it's a very complicated thing, writing music for especially for films, you know, and there's so many ways to do it. There's so many different styles you could use, and instruments and themes, and you have to work as a team. So often, normally what happens is obviously sometimes you're given a script early, but normally you wait till there's a cut of the film that the producers and directors are happy for you to see, and you watch it, and then it will change many times after that. But ideally you have a discussion. That is, if they have time, because often things are so hectic and busy, they may not be able to speak to you that much about what they want, or they may not know what they want. So you watch the movie and you begin to think about the characters, the drama, the themes you might use, what kind of instruments, is it going to be electronic, is it going to be orchestral? So there's a lot of questions, and then you start to write music, and you hope that the directors, producers, a team like what you're doing, and sometimes you never find out, you know, because they, you know, in the old days, you know, when you know, people like Spielberg was working with John Williams, he would sit with John Williams while he played piano, amazing piano of all the great themes of Star Wars and E.T. and all that stuff, and he would okay it, but he would never actually hear what it was going to sound like with an orchestra. He would only hear the piano playing. But nowadays, because of all technology, I'm in my studio and I've got the whole orchestral palette and every sound available. So what I present to the team is really quite close to what it will be. And then if we have the budget to record with a real orchestra, then that's the next stage. So yeah, it's a whole process, and I think you work together as a team. That's the key thing.
Are there any particular challenges for composing for motion pictures?
Yes, it's very difficult. You know, I mean, it's a very, as I said, it's just a complicated process. And one film is you do it one way, and another film is completely the opposite. And sometimes they love what you're doing, and sometimes they hate what you're doing, and sometimes they reject what you're doing. And so there's also the challenges of you write music and you put your heart in it and soul in it, and it may not be right. The team may think we need to do this differently, and often they actually, because they've been editing it for a long time before I get onto it, they're listening to music that has been put on there for the editors. You know, what's called the temp score, which is the score that people put in to edit to, and often what happens is they just love that, and they don't want to hear anything else. So you have something called temp love, and you have to get past that. So that's quite a challenge often. And also the challenge is that sometimes there's just literally, you have to write a lot of music very quickly, and it has to be very good. And that's difficult, you know. But I've survived so far.
It's good to hear. You mentioned speed. and you were talking to me the other day about the speed at which you had to compose for the last Borat film. That was very interesting. Perhaps you can sort of take us through that. How that
Yeah, well, obviously last year, there was a global pandemic, which we're still in a bit, what happened was the movie started filming before March of last year, when things we didn't know about what was going to happen, and then maybe about 40% had been done, and then COVID struck, everything shut down. We couldn't film, we couldn't go anywhere. They were filming all around America. I'm based in London, so I was not quite on. I wasn't quite working on it at that point. But then we didn't know whether it was going to be possible to finish the movie. You know, there was a whole how we would do it. And what happened was America started to open up in certain states. Said filming might be allowed here. So they found a way, and they got COVID people in to make sure it was all, you know, as safe as possible for the whole crew. So there's a huge extra expense on that. They had doctors, and they worked out a way to film safely in that situation. So we were back on, and then we were racing against time because it was a very political film, really, and as well as funny. And it's, you know, the election was coming up, you know, and we had to get it in before the election. So it came out a week before the election. So we all were working like crazy they were still filming different bits and changing things to the last moment, which is quite normal in my brother's movies. And basically, yeah, it was just a race against time, even more than normal. And then it came out the week before the election when Giuliani was. I don't know if you've seen the film, but there's a scene with Rudy Giuliani in the hotel room with a young girl, and anyway, I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but it's worth seeing. But he was just about to doing stuff, talking rubbish through that whole election campaign, and he was, starting to talk more rubbish. And then that week before the election, everybody was talking about him lying on a bed with this young girl which was captured in that movie. So it kind of was. We all felt it would succeeded, to hopefully change something.
And there's a specific score you composed for that film, Wuhan Flu.
Yeah. So because it was the sequel, so the sound of Borat was actually, as you probably know, Borat is a Kazakhstani not a very good one, but he's a Kazakhstani journalist, the number 3 journalist in Kazakhstan or something, and he's hopeless, obviously. But of course, it's not about Kazakhstan; it's about America, the movie, really, and about prejudice and all those other things. But the music actually that we use is not Kazakhstani at all. It was actually Gypsy, Romanian, Balkan, Serbian influenced, that folk sound. And so, the instruments for that, you got the gypsy violin, you got the accordion, clarinet, just that folk sound, which we actually recorded it in Vienna, which is the beginning of the Balkans, and great sort of folk musicians playing. Actually was and also there's a big brass band element, which is sort of the mad, energetic brass band, which is also like you get in Romania. So it's one of these things, although the film is meant to be Kazakhstani, it's actually not anyway, and the music is definitely not, So there's that part of it, and then there's the whole emotional part of it, which was when... By the way, if I'm going on too long, just let me know. There's going to be 3 of us here, it's just me now, so yes.
Called COVID.
Yes. So the relationship, there was this sort of long-lost daughter. Borat finds his daughter and then gets to know her, and he never knew her, and so there's an emotional core to this movie, which is a bit sentimental, and the music actually was really important to kind of give that relationship, and sort of follow that arc the way it grows through the film. So at the end, it's actually, you hopefully feel for these characters that they love each other at the end, and before he didn't even know who she was. So it was nice, and that was all done with an orchestra, and that was a more sort of orchestral theme that I wrote for that, which was quite emotional actually.
Yeah, music, soundtracks and scores. How strong an identity do you feel they tend to give a movie? Are they as a component?
Yeah, I think, as I said, every project is different. So, with the comedy films and with Borat, it's very tightly cut, and the music can, one beat too long here, or one can ruin the joke or get in the way of the joke. And it's really about the joke, but it's about other things as well. But with comedy in particular, and also action movies, it all has to hit the point, and it can't be out. So it's very precise. So that is important. But then I've done sort of, real life murder thriller type dramas and other programs where you can write these longer kind of lingering, sort of moody pieces of music that it doesn't matter if it ends quite exactly so tight, So it's particularly difficult comedy actually, because the exactness of it is quite tricky. The problem is you work really hard to get it just out, working, and then they change the scene by a second or make it shorter or longer. Then suddenly everything you did doesn't work, and you have to redo it, and that's part of the process.
The relationship between a producer and the music that is obviously imparted on the piece of production.
The music one?
Yeah, exactly, one. The relationship between a producer and you, or generally, how do you feel that tends to work? Do you have to be particularly close to each other in terms of understanding the requirements?
I think it's again, it varies. I've done very small, low-budget movies where it's a tiny team, and it's often the director really, and maybe the producer, and an editor, and that's really it. And you have to have, when the director or producer hands the film to the composer, they have to have some trust in the composer. It's quite nerve-wracking, I think, for them. It's very nerve-wracking when you play music to them, because although you think it's right, they may think it's wrong, and then you have to start again. But it normally starts the conversation. So it's important to have the trust and allow the composer to try things. And the worst thing for a composer is to say, can you just sound like the temp that we've been listening to 1,000 times? Because then that narrows what you can do. And hopefully someone like me and someone who is a good composer can do something even better that's tailor-made for the movie and give it themes that develop. So there's a small movies where sometimes things can work really smoothly because it's a tiny team, and then there's big movies where you've got, I've had the Hollywood movies I've done. Sometimes when I play the music, there's the director, there's several producers, there's the studio people, there's about 10 to 12 people in the room, and sometimes they all feel like they have to say something, even though they maybe some of them shouldn't, So you have to deal with that as well, and sometimes they disagree, and then who are you listening to? That's another whole different aspect. So sometimes it's simpler with a smaller team, and at least it's a very direct, you know who you're talking to.
Thank you. We're finding we're discovering new ways to source music these days. There are businesses like Synca, for example, that are creating opportunities for new musicians to find a route to get their creations onto films, shorts, and social media. What are your thoughts on businesses like Synca?
Yeah, so there's for most movies, there's kind of two parts of it. There's the especially composed music, which is what I do really, and then they always want some songs, some great songs that fit the mood, and often actually now, most bands, they're not touring obviously, and they're not selling records. So one way they can make money is to sync the song to the movies. So it's a great, a lot of filmmakers like to use songs at different points, obviously at the end, but also during the film sometimes with montages and stuff like that. So it's definitely, it can work very well for both sides. It's funny because as a composer, sometimes you you may not want. You might think you could write a piece of music that might be different, but it won't be a song, but it might fit better. But the song can work really well sometimes. It can be a brilliant part. It kind of almost like a light relief, or be a powerful thing, emotion. So it's a good. I think bands want it, and producers and directors want it. So Sinker's in a good position, for that side of things.
What advice would you give to a young composer who is looking to break into this field?
Don't put yourself through it. I think no. I think what I would say was it can be an amazing thing to do, and it can also be because you get to work on these hopefully great stories, and you help create those stories by writing the music to it, and it can be very satisfying to when you have a scene and you write you kind of enhance the emotion or the drama by what you're doing. It can be very exciting to do that, but it's kind of a lonely thing because you're working in this cave, which is your studio, trying to get everything ready, working day and night, and it's quite, you have to be ready for that, and you have to be. I think my advice would be ready to write in any style. You have to be a master of. So you could be asked to write for an orchestra. You could be asked to write an electronic score. Could be you could be asked to do an ethnic score, so world music or jazzy score. So you have to know and be a very versatile musician and know your genres, and also study great film scores that you like and see what they're doing, and try and learn from it. That would be my advice.
Thank you.
And then don't do it. It's the next bit. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone was here last night, but last night we had our Gala Awards event, and we recognized a number of significant contributions to the world of streaming and on-demand. And one of them was Best Motion Picture. And Best Motion Picture went to Borat, subsequent movie film. And we gave that award to that film because we believed in many ways it was a game changer. It was groundbreaking, and it demonstrated what a producer can achieve by going through the on-demand route, speed of delivery and so on. But we had a little discussion about it last night, but if you can you walk us through that and how you feel that film was a game changer as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was, as I said, it was really, it became, the film, because of the pandemic, it was always going to be about the election, but the pandemic became a political thing itself, which no one really, it was suddenly, if you're wearing a mask, you're anti-Trump, and if and you're Democrat, and they hate them, and it became a political thing how you dealt with the pandemic. So that was captured as well, and we didn't know that was going to happen, so that became an important part, and all the conspiracy theories about the injection, the Wuhan flu song, which was perhaps the most dangerous scene ever filmed. Actually, my brother, they told, when he told me in the team, he writes with a team of guys that and then sometimes they think of a song and they often have no time to get it right because they say, we thought of this idea, we're going to be filming next week in a rally. I said, okay. And they said, yeah, it's all the Trump supporters, but most of them will be carrying machine guns. And the idea is we're going to do. They had this line, Dr. Fauci, the chief medical officer in America, Dr. Fauci, what we're going to do, inject him with the Wuhan flu, So they told me that, and I just thought it was a brilliant idea because, all the conspiracy theories about the injection being, this sort of, with microchips and all the rubbish that you heard. So. It was obviously a very funny idea and a very satirical idea, but very dangerous because he was going to do it live. It could only happen once, and it couldn't go wrong because he wouldn't get a chance. You couldn't, I said to him, just make sure you get out alive. But I wrote this song, and we had I had all the instruments ready. In fact, we found a band to play it live at the rally. They were quite brave as well, actually. So they were in on it because they rehearsed it, but no one else knew anything about it. And you know, I think there is a sort of background film which you can see on Amazon on how he escaped from that, or almost didn't escape. So it was quite, you know, crazy. I was kind of happy that all I had to do was, you know, write the music in my cozy studio in London, rather than sort of risk my life. But it was actually, that was a key scene. Again, you know, one of the key scenes in the movie. So what was I've forgotten the question now, but hopefully that answers it anyway.
Yeah, I think it did. We also had an interesting conversation about the film Bruno, and obviously you composed the score for Bruno, and you managed to assemble a group of fairly famous musicians. How did that go?
So that was the end song we're talking about.
The end song, if you've seen it.
Which is called Dove of Peace. So that was another song that they kind of threw. I do love writing songs, because I'm actually a songwriter, and I had a band many years ago. We were signed band, and we toured the world a bit, and I loved getting the chance to write songs. But anyway, they often don't give me enough time to do it, as usual. So this was Bruno, which is a gay Austrian reporter, who is trying to, in the movie, at one point in the movie, he's trying to make peace between Israel and the Palestinians, and he has a Palestinian and an Israeli member of Parliament together in a room talking, and then he starts singing. They said, we want a song to help bring them together, and we're going to try and get them to sing together, and that will be making, you know, the incredible, you know, impossible peace between these two people. So the song was called Dove of Peace. Bruno, Dove of Peace, it was actually called. And I did it, and they filmed that scene, and then they loved the song so much, they decided to make it like a sort of charity song, like you'd see, you know, like great the artists do this big, you know, event, and for a good cause. So at the end of the film, we did a big version of that song, and that's how the film finishes. And what happens, I don't know if you've seen it, but for those who haven't, it's quite funny, because it starts with Borat singing it. Bruno singing it, the gay Austrian reporter. And then the next person you see singing it, which is standing next to him, it's revealed. I think it's Bono, or I think it's Bono is the next person. And then it's Sting. So we just had, then we had Chris Martin, and we had Slash playing guitar, we had Elton John, and we had Snoop Dogg. I'm trying to think we had anyone else, but anyway, it's a crazy number of people. So we got them all in the studio to sing the song I wrote, and that was interesting, because I was producing that session in a studio in LA, and it was, you know, normally in the studio you get the singers, they warm up, you get them to do a couple of takes of each thing, and you take the best take, you edit it. But what they did here was it was actually a very famous studio where Michael Jackson, Thriller was, Westwood Studios, where Thriller was quite a big studio. They actually were filming the movie at the same time as as the performances. So normally it wasn't me saying cut, let's do that again. The director had to say cut, and that was the end of it. And I just had to hope we had something usable. We actually have an 8-minute version of that song, because everybody did longer verses, and then it was all cut down to the funniest bits. So there's a very long, like Snoop Dogg, there's an incredible rap actually that I've got somewhere on my hard drives, and it was very non-gangster. He was like Bruno, Dove of Peace. You know, you're going to get the flowers and be nice, and it was so nice that he just improvised it. And we all thought this is incredible, but then we said, could he do it more gangster? You know, because actually we didn't want him to do, you know. So then he said, I'll put the gun to your head and all that stuff, and so I've got all these long versions of that track, which it was exciting, but also, like a lot of these things, very stressful at the same time.
Well, like everything I think that you do, yeah. Okay, so doesn't say it there, but as we had planned this panel today to include 3 other guests, and so Erran may have had 1 or 2 or 3 questions, but I've been throwing questions at you for the last 25 minutes. So I think I've asked enough questions. Wouldn't mind someone from the audience, if anyone would like to ask Erran a question. Let me come and find you, and I'll come to you. Anything you'd like to ask?
Thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah, Thank you for coming.
the several people here.
To him as well.
Is this hall big enough? I think that's a good question.
Is it actually as fun to work with the team as the movie is to watch?
Sorry, is it, say that? I couldn't hear that.
Is it as much fun to work with the team behind the scenes as it is to watch the movie itself as the audience? Because we laughed a lot.
Is it as fun to write the scenes?
Yeah, no, to work with the team behind the scenes.
Well, it's are you saying is it as fun as watching it as an audience? No, is the answer. I mean, it's like a nightmare, you know, because you have to. Obviously, when I write the music, you see the scene hundreds of times sometimes to get it right, and the scene is changing. It's being edited. Things are taken out, and it's kind of you're always. It's a process. So obviously, sometimes you see the scene, it's funny, and you do it, and then you have to write the music. So you have to work out how this fits into the whole picture, what theme comes here, what kind of emotion is going on, is there a particular bit where there's a joke where you have to be out the way so that the music doesn't spoil it? Who is the scene about? What is, you know, because if there's two or three people in the scene, is the scene about the person speaking or the person who's being spoken to? It's almost like you can change the perspective of the whole scene. So I would say it's fun when you finish it and you get to record it with the orchestra and it works, then you're sort of relieved, you know. And then actually, you know, sometimes beyond that, the film changes because of, you know, often editing continues even after it never used to happen. In the old days, the film was locked, that was it, and then you put the music, and that was the end of the process. But because of editing just continues, so my job is done, I've done the music, it sounds great, and then you hope it's going to still sound great when you see it, and often things have changed and you sort of think, oh, you know, but that's the way it is. So it's a kind of, watching the movie afterwards can be a bit sort of traumatic, actually, you know, because things have, you don't know what, you know, why things have changed. You think, oh, it's better before maybe. But normally, of course, no one would know that apart from me, you know, and everybody who's been working with the team, really. So I think that's the answer. hope that helps out.
Hi, I'm one of the founders here. Well, not a founder. The partners here.
I'm finding it hard to hear.
Oh, sorry. I'm one of the partners here, Joe Cullen. You created a really nice piece for us for the gala, which is classical, really. Borat is humour. Which is harder? Which do you prefer, and which is harder? Something that's going to show the wackiness of the movie, or creating something very formal on the award-type basis? And how long did it take you to create our little piece, which was lovely?
Well, I didn't have much time, you know, because I had to do it. But everything takes time. I would say, I think I mentioned already that comedy and also, you know, action movies are very time-dependent. So you really, you know, it's very, you have to make everything fit to the microsecond, and that is in itself very technical and difficult to do. Whereas the dramas I've done, it's sometimes, and also writing a theme like I did here, you're not worrying about that whole technical thing as much because you're just writing the theme, which, you know, if it was a comedy, I would have to then start to work out how it fits in with the actual scene and timing and where it comes in and out. So there's a whole technical level with especially with comedy and with all film, but especially comedy and action stuff, where you technically, you know, the technical side of that is incredibly hard to deal with, but we somehow do it, hopefully.
And very well, and we're hugely thankful to Erran for his composition. It really sets the scene for our festival and what we're striving to achieve. So, Erran Baron Cohen, thank you very much for making the flight, making the journey down from the UK, coming to visit us. It's been very interesting, good fun, good company. So I'd like to thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for getting me out here. It's good. Thank you so much.